I'm Henry Braun, the Mayor of Abbotsford, and with me today is our City Manager, Peter Sparanese. This morning, the City of Abbotsford and Fraser Health issued a do not use water advisory for all of Sumas Prairie. As you all know, a large portion of Sumas Prairie lake bottom remains underwater. This new advisory is being put in place due to the inaccessible water main breaches that are impacting the drinking water system. This means that running water in Sumas Prairie can only be used for flushing toilets. As of today, the area towards the eastern side of Sumas Prairie remains underwater. Our crews will not be able to fully evaluate that area until the water recedes. While the dike repairs were essential in sealing off the flow of water into the lake bottom area, we now need to keep pumping that water, the remaining water, and that will take time. Additionally, as you can imagine, this is not clean water. We know there are hazardous and potentially toxic material in these floodwaters, which is why we need to complete an environmental assessment of the area to ensure it is safe. Our focus today remains on being prepared for the weather events coming over the next few days and ensuring we are as ready as we can be. As of today, the repair to the main dike breach near Number 3 Road is approximately 90% complete. We expect another 3 feet of height to be added to the dike prior to the first weather event anticipated for tomorrow. Additionally, crews have made good progress overnight with reinforcements of the dike upstream of Atkinson Road. As this work continues, inspection crews are also continuing to evaluate all accessible bridges, roads, and culverts. To date, 21 bridges have been inspected by our structural engineers, 93 kilometers of road, and 378 culverts have been inspected by our geotechnical engineers. The Canadian Armed Forces continue to support sandbagging efforts in historic Claiborne Village on Matsqui Prairie, which is our other farming prairie, and assisting with other repair and reinforcement works. We've also been able to inspect drainage infrastructure in 65 locations in the Claiborne area. Turning to the recovery efforts, our rapid damage assessments being led by Task Force 1 continue as an important step in determining when evacuation orders can be lifted. I visited that site today. I was blown away. There is 75 people embedded in that Task Force 1 with all sorts of expertise, and we are grateful that they are with us today. They're doing some amazing work. While our rapid damage assessment team has done more than 1,000 assessments so far, we expect more than 2,000 additional assessments to be undertaken this week. It is vital that we conduct these rapid damage assessments to ensure that people can return to their homes and businesses as safely as possible. We are glad to hear yesterday that the provincial government has announced some financial support for flood victims, and this will be an important part of the recovery process moving forward, and the city will continue to work closely with our federal and provincial partners in this work. Many Abbotsford residents are asking, what can they do to help? Please give us a hand and clean out your local intakes and catch basins before these 3 weather events come here. Much of our operations staff have been diverted to deal with the major flooding events on Sumas Prairie and at Barrowtown. So if you are able to assist, we would greatly appreciate it. And now I want to make a personal comment. I am blown away by the number of emails, texts, voice messages, direct messages on social media channels that have encouraged me greatly. People ask me, how are we doing? We are doing well, given the number of people by the thousands who have messaged me from Vancouver to Halifax and beyond, actually, making sure that they know that they are standing with us and that their thoughts and prayers are with this city at this critical time. And so I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to everyone. You know who you are, and just continue to pray for us because we desperately need that. And while I'm not able to personally acknowledge every message I have received over the past 10 days, I want to take this moment to publicly thank all of you, and to the media too. You've been great getting our message out, so thank you. That is my update for today, and I will now take any questions. We are as ready as we can be. And the reason that this map is here is just to visually show you what has happened from when we began and where we are now. So on the western portion, which is the closest part of the prairie, which is nearest me, that was all underwater up to that yellow line, which is the Sumas Dike. When those two breaches happened, all of that water, and there was a lot of it, flooded into what was once the lake bottom, and you can see that water has all migrated to the eastern end, and it's still 7 feet or more deep in the central portion, and that's going to take a long time. That's where all the water breaks are in that eastern portion, and we can't get down there to find out what's going on. So as the water recedes and as we continue to pump it out, the bowl will become smaller in diameter, and eventually, bit by bit, that's why we haven't made a lot of progress since yesterday on inspecting bridges and culverts, is because they're underwater and we can't get to them. But we know the longer that water stays there, the more damage there will be with the saturation of the soils. So I thought it would be helpful for the public to see that's what's happening there. So a lot of people tell me when they drive down Sumas Way, they look to the east and they can't see any water. I mean, other than ponding here and there. I says, yes, that's because that whole water, or all of that water is now at the other end of the prairie, and that's 22,000 acres. So in any event, I just thought that would help.
What risk is there of contaminated water with the number of dead animals and any, toxic materials getting into the water?
The Ministry of Agriculture is looking after that. That would be a question you might want to ask them. But there is fertilizer out there. There's fuel tanks, both gasoline and diesel tanks. There's a lot of tractors that are underwater. There's a lot of vehicles underwater. So all of that is migrating, I'm pretty sure, into the water, which is why we want to make sure that the public doesn't, A, drink that water, but they also understand why we issued that do not use alert this morning.
We've heard reports today that they're going to open up Highway 1 from Abbotsford to Chilliwack. How rewarding is that?
Well, I will leave MOTI to make that highway is not our jurisdiction, and neither is Highway 11. So if that's what they're doing, I just ask you to check with them. So I am so busy. I'm not on top of everything, but I have a pretty good sense at a 30,000 foot level where we are.
Yeah, but it helps. If it does open by tomorrow, does that relieve a lot of pressure off Abbotsford?
If it opens up anytime this week, it would be amazing.
Got a couple of questions from a reporter working on a story about farmers. She spoke to a number of farmers today. They're still not able to go back to their farm homes, and they're quite upset about this. They point south of the border. They think they alerted people earlier. What is your take on that? Lessons learned for the future.
Well, that is that's a good question and a big conversation for a different day. I was out there yesterday with Minister Popham, and we talked to a lot of farmers, mostly blueberry, because we have 1,200 or some acres of blueberries that are underwater. And after 4 or 5 days, it's my understanding, based on a little bit of blueberry knowledge, that those plants have probably died, which means they got to come up and they got to plant new ones. And a blueberry plant doesn't produce a good crop until year 4, and a better crop in year 5. They will go for 40 years. So my heart ached. The stories that I saw and heard yesterday, and the people crying because they've watched their whole life and sometimes generations. There's one dairy farmer, 4 generations. So yes, there is. This is going to take a long time to recover, but I've reached out to the mayor of Sumas. I'll be talking to him this afternoon and talking to someone else in Washington State. But there's lots of questions that have to be asked and have been asked actually over the last 30 years. And the city itself has spent significant money doing our own studies to prepare for, or to alert people that this is going to happen, and now it's happened, and now it's too late.
And farmers are also saying farmers are saying they are being told that they need to get some city inspections done of their homes when they can go back in. They're concerned about the cost of that. Would council consider covering the normal city inspection fee?
The assessments and inspections that are being done mostly, well, I think exclusively, I'd have to go find out, but by Task Force 1 and our own building inspectors. This morning, there's 14 building inspectors that came from jurisdictions to the west of us. I don't know where they are coming from, but again, it's to relieve the stress and give our own crews who've been going 24/7 for 10 days just a break, because we can only stretch so far, and then things start to break and people, and I want to look after our own staff. So I'm grateful for those inspection teams, but that task force, if you aren't familiar with, I knew a little bit about it, but not much, but I would encourage people to go Google that and take that read. It is an amazing team. There's 6 across the country from one end to the other. This is the Vancouver team. They visit disaster areas and do an amazing job. But all of these buildings and bridges and buildings on private property have to be inspected. There's trailer parks, trailer homes out there. If they're floating and somebody goes in there and something happens, I know that it's taking longer than they would like, but I would just ask for the public's patience and grace, because this is not an easy task. This is a monumental undertaking that we are, I know the public doesn't see that, but I see it. And we have to do this. We have not had an injury or a fatality yet that we are aware of. And I want to keep it that way. But in order for that to protect our residents in Sumas Prairie, we have to go in there and check every building and check or put those yellow, blue, yellow, and red, I think they are. I'm totally colorblind. People say, why don't you just take the colors? I can't see those colors. I know where the lines are, and I know what they represent. So anyways, thank you.
What about the cost of those city inspections, though?
Sorry, well, let's, I just want to give everybody equal time here.
Okay, well, there's something I had to ask.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Was, what the cost of the city can control, city inspections, is council open to doing something to help farmers with those costs?
That is something council would have to, we've not discussed that, and that's for further on, but we're under a local state of emergency, so there's all sorts of funding that comes in from the federal and provincial governments. So I'm going to look after our residents and stick up for them. You can be sure of that.
What kind of damage did you see on some of the local blueberry farms? You mentioned a bit earlier, but can you go into a little more detail?
Well, it's not damage. When the water recedes, most people say, well, there's nothing there. Well, if they're underwater for more than 4 or 5 days, the plant itself dies. And so it has to be pulled up, replanted, and you wait for 4 or 5 years to get a decent crop. And some of those farmers they've told me they don't know if they're going to do that. They don't know if they financially can do that. And so when all of this comes at me, you know, I broke down a couple of times a couple of days ago. That's why, because I have all that stuff in my head, and I feel for those people, the dairy people, you know, the number of deaths in our dairy our herds are not as much as was first predicted. So that's good news.
You were saying earlier that all your maintenance and your engineers have checked a lot of the diking thing, but we have 4 days of good torrential rain coming again. Your thoughts on the fact that we all know that the diking system has been flawed for a number of decades now, and what's your thoughts on the fact that the pump house is obviously running fine, but the rest of the diking with all the rest of the water, you obviously have people on boots on the ground, but your thoughts on that?
Well, I think I'm concerned with all 3 events, but the first one I think we can handle. What we don't know is some of that dike is still underwater. We can't really see the toe of that slope, but the rainfall that's coming, I think we can handle for Thursday, Friday. The next one is then on the weekend. It's the third one I'm more concerned about, but we don't have enough data yet. That's out there a ways. But if all that rain comes, I think we can still handle it. The dikes are where they are. The problem here that started is that the dike at the eastern end overtopped and ran over the dike for I don't know how long, but enough to cause a breach. So these dikes all need to come up. We've been saying that for 30 years, long before George Ferguson, long before I have became the mayor, warned our friends across the border and federally and provincially, we need help. And we still need help, and we need to rebuild these dikes, and that's a $500–600 million bill.
You said you were talking with the U.S. side. They obviously know what's going on here. In your mind, can you feel a sense of maybe they're going to maybe look into what they can do on their side to stop that other river from overflowing? Is that been looked at? Has that been addressed?
I don't know what they will do, but they are well aware. I've had emails from people in Everson and Washington State and saying the same things that our resident. They feel for where we are, and they want me to pressure Washington State to get this finally, this task force, I think it was, whatever it was called, that was stood up after the 1990 flood. And all those reports are wonderful reports, but if they just sit on a shelf, they're useless.
So are they in the same boat? I mean, are they in the same boat that the topography is just what it is, and maybe the decades have gone by, and with global changing, do they need is it as simple as just going, we'll fix the dikes, or is there more to it?
No, it's very complicated, because it's an international, I really want to stay out of that. That's for the Americans and the Canadian governments to sort out.
But it has to be addressed.
Oh, totally, or we're going to have this again. Everson is just down here, 8 miles from the Sumas border, where the breaches occurred not breach, but overtopping over there. So it doesn't take very long to get here, but yeah, there's some solutions, and we outlined those solutions in a report that Council commissioned and received on, I think it was December the 9th of 2020. So it's less than a year ago. That report outlines what needs to be done, and I have had good conversations with the Prime Minister and the Premier and many provincial ministers. I really believe that this time it will get fixed. The sad part is it always seems to take a catastrophe for stuff to get fixed. So, don't see any other hands. Thank you for being here, and tomorrow's update will be at 2 p.m. Thank you.